The Buffalo Bills improved to 2-1 on the season after taking down the Washington Commanders 37-3.
You are now listening to the Watering Buffalo podcast with your hosts, Justin Goddard and Andrew Chang.
Bills Mafia, welcome into another episode of the Wandering Buffalo podcast, a show on the Buffalo FamBase podcast network. My name is Justin. I'm going to be your host today. And Bills Mafia, we got another win to talk about today. Bills taking down the Commanders 37-3. Just a very lopsided feeling game. One of those games that we got to experience a lot of times last year where it kind of just from the beginning never really felt like it was in doubt. All around great game from the offense, great game from the defense. So we're going to get right into it. I'm going to start out this week with things I didn't like in the game. Should be a pretty easy segment here, pretty thorough dismantling, so there's not much to dislike. I'm going to start off with, we talked a little bit last week about kind of like the wide receiver room and the moves that we made to try to improve the room. And kind of last year, it so much falling on Diggs, and it was Diggs and no one else. And it kind of saw that in today's game. Allen spread the ball all over the place, a bunch of different people catching passes, but there was nobody that had, really like marquee impacts on the game. Gabe Davis had the nice 35-yard strike for a touchdown. But outside of that, he had 4 targets, and that was his only reception. And then kind of everybody else, the next highest receiver was Trent Sherfield getting a total of 18 yards. It's okay in a game like this. It doesn't really end up mattering. But kind of in a game where you're facing a better opponent that might be able to do more to limit Diggs. He was like 50% of your passing offense. So just something to keep an eye on. In particular for me, it's Deontay Hardy right now. I was really excited for him coming in, and we just haven't really seen much from him to this point. Just very limited usage, and a lot of the stuff they're doing with him are like these jet sweeps, these bubble screens where he's starting with the ball behind the line of scrimmage. But all total for him, he had 4 touches for 13 yards. It's just not a very, very efficient usage there. And I understand kind of like that McKenzie role that we've seen in the past. Some of those jet sweeps are like really successful, and sometimes they get sniffed out by the defense, and it's kind of like a high risk, high reward type of play. But we really just haven't seen any level of success with that from him thus far this season. Second thing I didn't like, again, we're going to get real ticky-tacky here. Didn't love allowing that field goal at the end. I know it doesn't, matter in the grand scheme of anything. But to just go like 3 3/4 of the game and just have a drive end in the field goal on what was the second last drive. It's just nice to see the Bills serve up a donut. Not a big deal. Always nice to finish out the game with a shutout. Excuse me. Other thing I didn't like, again, very small detail, doesn't really matter. James Cook coming up 2 yards short after that long run. Nothing against him, players get caught from behind and whatnot. But just an absolute beautiful run he ripped off. I believe it went for 34 yards and gets tackled just short of the goal line. And it's not that he didn't get in the end zone there. I do want to see him, make it into the end zone. I think part of this running back room is going to be Latavius Murray and Damian Harris stealing goal line snaps, and I want Cook to score where he can, because I think he's going to do like the bulk of the rushing, the bulk of the yardage, and then when we get in tight, it's not really going to be his time to shine. But what I disliked about that the most is that 2 yards that he came up shy would have put him at 100 yards for the day. And I believe that was Latavius Murray ends up punching that in for a 2-yard touchdown. I would have really loved for them to just kind of force Cook in there, even if it's not going to be, his typical usage, just to let the guy get to 100 yards and get a touchdown on the day. But I feel like that's part of, like, the fan in me that wants to see the stats. I don't think they care about that nearly as much in the locker room, but that's just me. And then the last thing I did not like today, and this has absolutely nothing to do with the Bills, but our next week opponent, the Miami Dolphins, just went out there and hung 70 points on the Broncos. Now, I don't think the Broncos are any sort of, world beater team. We see teams get boat raced all the time in the NFL. But 70 is a big number. That might be the highest point total that I've seen from a team that I can ever remember. And I still think the Bills are the team to beat in the AFC East. But Miami's really showing like they're a different team. There's not some flash in the pan. They can move the ball. They can score. They have speed everywhere. It's going to be a big challenge next week. And, fortunately, historically, Josh Allen has played some really good football against the Dolphins. I'm pretty sure he's only lost to them once since he's been drafted by the team. But yeah, this is a different Dolphins team. And I guess the other thing I don't like, and this is just commentary on the AFC East in general, is we were all just content to be shitty teams in the AFC East when the Patriots were dominating. Bills get to, be the best team in the division by an easy margin for like 2 years, and everybody else decided to get good at the same time. I mean, the Jets are in a different situation now, now that they don't have Aaron Rodgers for the season. But you're talking Bills, Dolphins, Jets all kind of had this come up, 1 year after the other. And, the Dolphins are a legit team right now. And I'm making no mistakes about the Jets. They're one quarterback away from being a legit contender as well. To the point where adding Aaron Rodgers was making them Super Bowl favorites. I'm not going that far with it. But I mean, that team is set up for the future with young defensive weapons, young offensive weapons, all kinds of talent on that roster. And if they just get kind of middling quarterback play, they're going to win a lot of games. But that's really it for things I didn't like this week. Stick around. I'm going to take a quick break. And on the other side, we'll talk about things that I did like.
Hey, this is Bills Vader. Now back to the show.
Bills Mafia, welcome back in, and thank you again for joining me on this week's episode of the Wandering Buffalo podcast. We're going to dive back in and talk about things that I did like this week, and I'm going to kind of limit how much I talk about here. I don't want to, turn the show into an hour-long thing, but there was a ton to like from this game, and I want to start out with the defense, and in particular, Terrel Bernard. That middle linebacker position was the biggest, debate position that we talked about in the offseason. I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but I had giant concerns going into this season, and it was largely based on wanting it to be Bernard. We invested a 3rd-round pick in him. He's got some time in the system, but we'd never really seen him play. He had like some spot duty. Then we didn't get to see him, throughout the preseason to kind of let this position battle play out. And, he ends up getting the nod as the starter. And we're just kind of hoping for the best. And, through the first 3 games of the season, I think he's played great, and matching him up with Milano and some of the things that he was able to do, in particular today, some of the opportunistic stuff. I mean, this dude had 2 sacks today, an interception, and a fumble recovery. Like that's a ridiculous stat line. And I'm not going to do like this 1-for-1 comparison to Edmonds. I mean, they were very different football players. Bernard's still very young in his career. I need to see this kind of week over week to know that it's going to be sustained. I don't expect him to have this game every week, but that type of impact. But I'm putting this game kind of right up there with some of the best games I can think of that Edmonds had over a 5-year career with the team. That's just a stupid stat line. So kudos to Bernard. Shout out for shutting anybody up that had doubts about you going into the season, because that dude went out and balled today. Defense in general, talking 9 sacks today, and they did exactly what I was hoping for in this game. And it's something that we've seen so much from this defense under Frazier, now under McDermott, of being able to take advantage of young quarterbacks. Sam Howell, not a rookie, but kind of getting his first starting action. And he was kind of balling out the first couple of games of the season. Had the Commanders riding 2-0 and came into this game, and I was kind of hoping that the Bills were able to use some of that disguised coverages they do. Look like you're going to blitz, pull people into coverage. All the fun little stuff that they do to confuse quarterbacks. And not only were they able to do that and, affected on the back end with interceptions, coming away with 4 today. But that defensive line was gassed up today. Like I said, 9 total sacks from the team. Daquan Jones, still waiting for him to get his extension. He gets 1.5 sacks. Ed Oliver, 1.5 sacks. Leonard Floyd with 2. Greg Rousseau getting 1. AJ Epinesa with a sack, and then a pick 6 as well, which was absolutely fun to watch. But yeah, this defensive line is something I've talked about so much in the past, and we've invested so many assets into this defensive line over the years and just not really gotten it right. And, it's a 1-game sample size. I don't expect them to get 9 sacks every week. But they went out there and they did it today, and it wasn't, one person taking over the game. It was contributions from everybody. Leonard Floyd having a great game and really a great start to his career with the Bills. And we did all of this with Von Miller still not active with the team. We're able to put up these numbers right now with that defensive line, and we don't have, our top 3 players on the team, one of the best pass rushers, at the very least active right now, let alone, where he stands historically. So it just kind of gives me confidence that when he does come back, we can ease him back in if we need to. We can have him take a little bit less snaps if it makes him more impactful. I know he was always a high snap percentage guy, so maybe that's not something they want to do. But there's options on the table. Greg Rousseau continuing to develop into this, really blossom into this really effective defensive end. Love seeing Trey White get an interception out there today. I thought there, was a couple times he got beat a little bit, but the Trey White interception today was kind of like vintage Trey, just being where he was supposed to be, playing really smart football. Love seeing him, back to playing at that Trey White level. On offense, kind of second week in a row, I got to give the props to the offensive line. No sacks allowed today. And this was a very different defensive front than we faced against the Raiders last week, where the Raiders kind of had that marquee game wrecker in Max Crosby and, some other guys filling in next to him, especially with Chandler Jones not with the team. This week was a different kind of matchup with really kind of first round picks all over that defensive line. That we ended up getting Tim Settle from the Commanders, kind of just because there was so much talent ahead of him. He wasn't really getting on the field. But Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Deron Payne. This is a team that I believe they had 9 sacks through the first 2 games and 0 today. And that's just, it makes me excited for this offensive line going forward throughout the season, because it is somewhere where we struggled a lot in the past. And again, everything I'm talking about today, I'm giving it with the context of it's a 1-game sample size. But that Commanders line has some dudes on the other side, and they were able to really protect Josh today. Speaking of Josh, really liked the game that he had today, and this isn't gonna, his numbers today aren't gonna, merit him his second consecutive, AFC offensive player of the week. Kind of really pedestrian looking numbers. Ends up 20 for 32, 218 yards, a touchdown, an interception. The interception this week, I don't really have a problem with. It was kind of like a 3rd and long and took a shot down the field. That's something that we see happen very often, where the flag comes out or Josh is able to hit the deep throw. It ends up being an interception. It's an arm punt. The Commanders start with the ball inside their own 10. And I'm perfectly okay with him taking chances like that in a game where the Commanders aren't really doing anything on offense and you've been able to move the ball. Take the shot. And I believe it was a one-on-one matchup, so not forcing it into triple coverage. But there were a couple spots early in the game where I thought Josh was playing a little gunslingery. One particular pass I remember going into triple coverage, and I was like, are we gonna calm down today? And then he kind of really settled in and was just taking the profits, and it was, we didn't go beyond 16 points for quite some time in this game, and it was kind of pumping the brakes a little bit and realizing that he didn't have to get out there and try to score 50 points. His defense was gonna keep the Commanders down, and it could be a game where you scored 20, 23 points and win comfortably. Now, obviously, some things happen and they end up getting to 37, but it would have been a very comfortable win had they, only got up to 20 points. So, like seeing this kind of game from Josh where, nobody's going to remember this game statistically. Nobody's, it's going to be a forgotten game. He went for 220 yards, very pedestrian numbers. But it was also what he had to do in this game to get the win. And we still got to see, that electric pylon 35-yard touchdown to Gabe Davis. We still saw him thread the ball into some tight windows. But it was much more like as it needed to be done versus just kind of trying to jam it in there. He also did have, 3 carries, 46 yards and a touchdown today. And I thought those were, good, smart runs from him. It wasn't hero ball Josh. It was kind of picking his spots. He was sliding out there today, which is something you rarely see. But yeah, all around good day from Josh. And then I want to wrap up with, Stephon Diggs and then the running backs. And in the first segment, I'm talking about how, it's Diggs and everybody else. And don't love that. Want to see other guys stepping up and knowing that we have the ancillary options if a team really, does its does its best to take away Diggs. That being said, still love the game that Diggs had. Can't take that away from him just because he was, the only one having great success. But 8 catches on 12 targets, 111 yards. Just a great game for Diggs. And it so often with Diggs, it feels like he has kind of these like quietish 100-yard games where it just keeps chipping away, and then you kind of look at the stat box and all of a sudden he's over 100 again. So great consistency from him, just great all-around game. There are a couple times where I would like him to kind of see the 3 defenders coming in and don't go for the yak on that one. We saw him with a little bit of an injury scare to his arm earlier in the game, came back in, but when we're talking about the receiver unit being, Diggs and everybody else, I would like Diggs to be in there and be healthy. And then wrapping up with the running back room, already touched on James Cook a little bit, 15 carries, 98 yards. Also added 2 catches for 14 yards. And this is a game where, he was averaging about 4 yards a carry and, ends up towards the end of the game busting out that 34-yard carry. So, I guess getting close to the 100 is a little deceptive. But still without that carry, he had, 14 for, 60-something yards. Still averaging about 4 yards a carry, which is perfectly acceptable. And I'm not going to completely ignore the 30-yard run because that's what James Cook brings to this running back room that we haven't really had, that breakaway speed, that open field ability. So that type of run is one that he can conceivably crack at any point in any game. I really love the way that this running back room is built, and we haven't seen, like gaudy numbers from Latavius Murray and Damian Harris. They both had 5 carries for 15 yards today. Latavius Murray getting the touchdown. But I think their role on this team is going to be a little bit lost. Like if you're just doing stat sheet scouting, you're not gonna really see the value that they're providing to this team. And it's that short yardage, it's the goal line, it's the tough running that I feel like the team has wanted for years, going back to drafting Zach Moss, and he never really kind of panned out in that role. And we saw so much of it always fall to Josh Allen, or when we had Singletary in the past, it was kind of like if we ran it with him on 3rd and 1, the offensive line was struggling. So he had to, make a person miss in the backfield to just get that 1 yard. So this is going kind of hand in hand with the improvement that we're seeing from the offensive line, but also just the running backs being able to just get downhill, go straight ahead. And, it's not a huge yards per carry. It's not huge volume. It's not huge yardage. But in the context of the game script and what it's doing for the team, keeping drives alive, keeping hits off Josh Allen, and kind of setting up a little bit of variance. How often did we line up last year? 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, it's going to be a Josh, quarterback sneak, or kind of the naked bootleg, and we saw it over and over again. And to the credit, it still worked more often than not. But if you start having that consistent success with Murray and Harris coming into the game on 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, and that's what you keep putting on film is 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, it's going to go to these guys right up the middle. And all of a sudden you get everybody loaded up into the box, and then you do the Josh Allen naked bootleg, and there's nobody there to cover it. He's got to make one guy miss, and it's, a cornerback that Josh Allen can run through. It just opens up another layer to the playbook. and just every small thing that you can take off of being, only Josh Allen is only going to help Josh Allen be better. It might change, his stat lines like we see in a game like today. The defense really, pulling their weight today, getting a lot of production from the running game, especially down the stretch. We're going to see games where Josh Allen's numbers look more pedestrian. I don't really care what the stat sheet looks like at the end of the game. It's fun to see him throw for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns, and in particular doing that in games where he has to. But I'm here for the wins, and the more the team can contribute around him, and it's kind of like you're winning with Josh Allen instead of like you're only winning because of Josh Allen. It's making you a more complete team, and hopefully that translates to more sustained success as we get into the playoffs, where we've seen, teams come up short, look a little flat, not have answers outside of Josh being a hero. So all around, a ton to like from this game. Up next for the Bills, like I mentioned before, Miami Dolphins. They're coming off a heater today, 70 points. That's crazy. But we'll be here next Monday to talk about that game. Hopefully we're talking about another Bills win. Just a couple of things. Want to thank you again for tuning in today. If you have made it this far, please make sure you like, share, subscribe, tell a friend. We have episodes coming out every Monday. So make sure you're tuning in. Make sure you check out the Wandering Buffalo website, wanderingbuff.com. Our producer Jake does great work on the website. We have articles up, kind of just breaking down some things that we don't talk about on the show. We have a couple other writers getting involved. So a lot of good stuff going on over there. And then we do have dropping this week the shirt that I am wearing today. It is our Wandering Buffalo breast cancer shirt for the month of October. It's going to be dropping this week. Anybody that's listened to the show for a while, you may know that my wife is currently in a battle with breast cancer, so this shirt means a lot to me. We're going to be taking the proceeds that we get from this shirt and donating it to the American Cancer Society for, cancer research, whatever they do with it. But yeah, it's something that's touches the lives of so many, but has become deeply personal to me as of, recent events. So appreciate any support that you can give there. And hey, other than that, we'll talk to you next week. And as always, go Bills.